Well, British Prime Minister Theresa May has assured South African businesses that the United Kingdom's Brexit talks will not affect trade on the African continent. In fact, May has committed to invest billions of pounds and maintain aid on the continent.
The British Prime Minister is on a whirlwind tour of 3 African countries.
British Prime Minister Theresa May is on an African visit, visiting South Africa, Nigeria and Kenya this week. She's committed what she calls an ambitious partnership on the African continent. She's even supporting calls for Africa to be represented on the United Nations Security Council. Prime Minister May maintains that Africa should not worry about the UK's decision to leave the European Union.
We will today confirm plans to carry over the European Union's Economic Partnership Agreement with the Southern African Customs Union and Mozambique, once the EU's deal no longer applies to the UK.
Prime Minister May, who is also under pressure to increase social spending back home, is also committed not to cut foreign aid on the continent. She says the UK's Development Finance Institution, CDC, is set to plough £3.5 billion over the next 4 years on the continent, and the British government will also step up investment.
I can today announce an additional £4 billion programme of UK investment in African economies that will pave the way for at least another £4 billion of private sector financing.
Land expropriation without compensation does not seem to bother Prime Minister May, unlike US President Donald Trump. She says she's also comforted by President Cyril Ramaphosa's commitment that the proposed policy will not amount to land grabs.
But I welcome the comments that he has already made about us approaching land reform, bearing in mind the economic and social consequences. And I think he's made a reference to no smash and grab land reform.
Prime Minister May has committed to a new approach to development, while she faces pressure back home about increasing social spending. This will, however, not lead to cuts in foreign aid on the continent. She says investment on the continent will lead to stability. And she's also spoken at length about the fight of terrorism. Bulelani Phillip, SABC News, Cape Town.
Well, he has filed that report, and we'll get more on him from him now from just on that British Prime Minister visit of Theresa May. We cross straight to Bulelani Phillip in Cape Town. Bulelani, clearly the message here is to say, don't worry, our communication and our trade deals are certainly safe.
Certainly, Arabile, I think the emphasis really here has been about the issue of strengthening trade relations between the UK as well as the African continent. Of course, Theresa May making that assurance that the ongoing talks around Brexit will not affect trade relations between Africa and the UK, promising and committing that the partnerships that have been entered with the European Union will continue even after the UK has left the European Union. So the emphasis there is that don't worry, all trade relations will be restored even post the Brexit.
It seems a priority to ensure that Africa is at the forefront of this conversation as well. Of course, with the Prime Minister visiting a few more countries than just South Africa. Do you think fears were set apart or perhaps put to the side? Did she do enough to set fears aside here?
Well, I mean, she did make the concession that, I mean, this is the first time in South Africa and on the African continent since she's been Prime Minister. And the sentiment, again, there is that while maybe she has left it a bit too late in her term of office, but, you know, the strength of the relations between Africa and the UK will continue. And she's also said that there have been other, foreign ministers who have been, engaging with South Africa on an ongoing basis. And I think Theresa May is also just maybe taking it a step further to ensure that the relations between, the UK and Africa are restored. Of course, she's announced today again that the Development Finance Institution of the UK, CDC, will plough about £3.5 billion on the continent over the next 4 years. over and above that, she's saying that her government is also going to invest about £4 billion on the continent, which would probably lead to a further £4 billion investment by the private sector. So the trade relations are actually going to continue, even though she's under pressure back home to increase social spending. She says that, that will not lead to cuts in foreign aid on the continent.
A 29-man strong team to visit not just South Africa, but the rest of the continent too, clearly shows how serious she is about the matter. But the counterparts here have the people that you've perhaps interacted with been forthcoming to her message?
Well, I attended a business breakfast this morning where she was, delivering her keynote address, and I think her message was well received, given that the assurances that she's made. And she's also spoken at length, really, around the issues of terrorism, and she's saying that the UK has been working closely with countries like Kenya as well as Nigeria in terms of training and also giving them skills in counter-terrorism strategies. So she's actually saying that those political ties must actually lead to a united front on the new partnership. Again, what she calls a new, way of looking at development on the continent. So she's going to be visiting Nigeria and Kenya later this week, where I guess the same message is going to be imparted with those countries.
Some of those trade agreements that were signed moments ago, do we know exactly what those entail and how much they're for?
Well, we do understand that the trade ministers are going to be meeting here in Parliament at 10 days, where the actual bilateral agreements are going to be signed. And I think the message that Theresa May was making in a statement a short while ago, while she was addressing the media with President Cyril Ramaphosa, was that, again, the emphasis is that trade relations must continue, and in fact, they must be stepped up by both sides. But what she did emphasize again was that these trade relations must be mutually, beneficial to both countries.
Bulelani Phillip, appreciate your time there, but certainly an interesting visit and one that I'm sure we'll get more out of as she continues to trek through Africa.